Escapism is a behavior that I've had for as long as I can remember. Since I was little, my father always encouraged my imagination, and a byproduct of that is that I've become a very avid maladaptive daydreamer. Prior to starting this little YouTube thing, I was also a writer, and a very pretentious one at that. A habit I've had since my preteen years was to find or create a story to escape to whenever my life wasn't going my way, which was a rather frequent occurrence. I know for a fact that this is a habit that is almost universal to the human experience. We all escape somewhere to feel safe. The only difference is our destinations. An interesting phenomenon that started in 2012 and never really lost too much traction since then was the popularization of isekai. In case you don't know, isekai or portal fantasy is a genre of fiction that usually involves a person from the real world somehow being transported to a fantasy world, oftentimes as a result of them dying, but not necessarily. To the non-weeb viewers, a good example of a portal fantasy would be the Chronicles of Narnia, where you have a group of people in a pretty bad situation that are transported to a magical world where they live a ton of adventures. The great majority of isekai stories are in one way or another explorations of power fantasies, though again, not necessarily. The genre was popularized by Sword Art Online, and without commenting on the quality of the story itself, I remember watching that and saying that's literally what I want. I wanted to escape the dull, grey reality of everyday life and go to a beautiful, bright and colorful world. A world where I wasn't some loser, but rather someone relevant, and more importantly, a world where everyday life was exciting. That's when my desire for escapism became a very concrete concept to me, and a core part of my identity for a huge portion of my life. Unless you have a really unique job or hobby, the times where our hearts actually get racing with excitement past the age of 13 are very, very rare indeed. The sense of epicness and novelty we so often see in fiction is completely absent from the lives of the great majority of people, hence why we seek refuge in imaginary worlds. Fiction is by its very nature more interesting than reality because it takes some more interesting parts of reality, amplifies them, and shaves off the boring and annoying parts such as bathroom breaks or paying taxes. It's the reason why you almost never see those things happening in works of fiction, because the purpose of fiction is to tell an interesting story. And as much as going to the bathroom the day after having Taco Bell for dinner might get your heart racing, I'd argue not a lot of people would consider that intriguing despite the pyrotechnics. Naturally, fiction isn't the only place people can escape to. There's also stuff like working out, partying, or doing drugs, but both due to the lack of practicality of getting footage for those three and my own experience with fiction and storytelling, I will be speaking from the perspective of someone who uses stories and games as their main form of escapism. And speaking of games, I'll have the gameplay of a few of my comfort games in the background because showing a Google Doc of the cringe shit I write is likely to nuke my retention rate. The games you'll be seeing in the background are all places that I tend to escape to. To many of us, Minecraft is a game that has been with us through our childhood and adolescence. In my experience, it's a game that I always come back to every few years because it's like a portal that brings me back to a time where I wasn't necessarily happier than I am today, but things were simpler and easier. It doesn't matter how much one's life changes. You may get into middle school or high school or college or get a job, Minecraft always remains a constant. It always remains the same, especially considering the frequency and volume of the updates. The beautiful simplicity of the world is what makes it so comfortable to me, but to you it might be something completely different. It might be the knowledge that every time you start a new world, you have an entire planet all for yourself, an empty canvas, a tabula rasa for all your ideas and builds. It might be the excitement over all the plans that you have for your world, the sense of discovery, whatever it is, you are the main character, you are the protagonist of that story. And I feel like Minecraft is a good avenue to explore the first type of escapism, more specifically the first reason why someone might want to escape reality. I believe that we can all agree that reality is, for the most part, boring AF. At least for the majority of our days. 99% of the time, we will be doing the same stuff we've always done, and very seldom are the times when we actually get to feel strong bursts of positive emotion. Stuff such as genuine excitement or joy. And if you do get those feelings frequently, get out, this video isn't for you. Everyone is the main character of their own life, and the realization that your life, your story, is boring, it's rough, to put it mildly. It's the ruining of childhood dreams when you wanted to live a grand adventure, become an astronaut or whatever. Why can't you live a grand adventure? Why can't we just be the protagonist? When you think about it, it's kinda unfair to be spawned from the void only to have your existence not be something exciting or fun, but something boring, and in some cases something genuinely awful. It's on those days when you're completely done with the bullshit life puts you through, when you're just arrived home after dealing with the asswipes you have the misfortune of calling classmates or colleagues, you sit down, put on your favorite game, series or book, and just let your mind drift to a better place. When it comes to the small pleasures in life, this set of actions is by far one of my favorites. It's when I finally get to become the protagonist of what I'm doing. But depending on how your life is going, or more specifically, how eroded your mind is from all the stresses and problems you've been dealing with, the places we escape to aren't necessarily beautiful valleys of sunshine and rainbows. Minecraft isn't my only comfort game. As a matter of fact, it's my third option. The other two being Mirror's Edge Catalyst and the Souls games, which actually brings me to a point I wanted to explore a little bit. Mirror's Edge is technically a dystopia, but it's aesthetically pleasing enough that I don't really think about it that much. However, the Souls games are considered comfort games for a lot of people, me included. And it's funny because the places you explore in these games are sometimes pretty, but more often than not they're places of madness and despair. Makes me feel like I'm having the average college experience.
Free me from this place before I go mad.
The places we escape to aren't always necessarily happy places. More often than being a place where you can feel powerful and or comfortable, there are places that in one way or another allows us to make sense of our emotions, be it the ones that we're feeling currently or the ones that we want to feel. They offer us some form of control, be it control over how we live our lives, control over our freedom, or more morbidly, control over how we suffer. Don't believe me? You shouldn't. I'm an anime boy on the internet. I don't have a degree in psychology, and all I do in these videos is talk out of my ass with a calm and mildly pretentious voice tone. But I do have a few things about this topic that I wanted to explore further. The second reason why someone might want to escape is because, let's face it, reality is terrifying AF. It's an infernal swing between either feeling too bored to care or too overwhelmed to do anything. Nobody feels the need to escape when their lives are going well, because why would you? It's a sad realization to know that you only feel some sort of bliss when you're putting your life on hold and letting your imagination, or the content you consume, take a hold of you. They are the only places where you can truly feel like yourself, the only places where you truly feel accepted. On the days when I was drilling a hole in rock bottom, I usually escaped to two different types of stories, both in the ones that I wrote for myself and the ones that I consumed. Those were, respectively, extremely light-hearted romantic slice of life shit and deeply, profoundly perturbing things, sometimes both at once. On one hand, there's the desire to feel better, and on the other, there's the desire to explore the bottom of the well. And if you think about it, that latter option doesn't really make sense. It's not that we want to feel bad, but it feels natural. It's weird. It's comfortable in a profusely twisted way to want to simmer in the bad feelings, even when you have the choice to make your life better. It's the same thing that, at least in my experience, makes it hard to listen to upbeat happy songs when you feel like crap. When you're feeling a bad emotion, even if you want to feel happy or at least get back to your hedonic set point, there's something that compels us to make sense of our bad feelings first. While it's not exactly fun or good, it feels natural to want to stew in our own little misery pot for as long as we need. Not necessarily waiting for an improvement to our current predicament, but just longing for the feeling of having some control over it, because the things we can control are very unlikely to hurt us, at least without our consent. How and where you escape to is your business, and it varies from person to person. Whether you prefer to go to a brighter place or a darker one, there is no right answer, because the subject is by its very nature extremely subjective, and it varies based on individual experience. A little fact about me that none of you asked for is that when I was first starting college, I was for some reason completely mortified at the concept that I was growing older. Something about me then, and actually to this day, made me feel really weirded out by the feeling that the freedom and free time I had back in middle school and high school would only decrease as time went on. I'm in the middle of college now, but for some reason I still feel like I'm 16 years old, and I wouldn't feel weirded out if I were to wake up tomorrow and just have a normal day in high school. I was extremely nostalgic for that time, and as a result I began to write a high school romance story that went on for 500 pages as of now. Over 200,000 words completely fueled by the nostalgia for a time that wasn't necessarily better, but it was a time I was familiar with. A time I knew well, one where I had enough authority to act of my own accord, enough freedom to do pretty much whatever I wanted, but not enough responsibility to have to worry about the consequences of being a dumbass. I had those things, and I miss them now. I wanted to go back, so in a way I did. Not physically, but through the exploration of my own little world. That's why we escape to the realms that we can control. Games, stories, drugs, AI, imagination, you name it. We go to those places because they are in accordance to our desires and feelings. and we get to understand our emotions there, and understanding is the first step to eventually get control over something. The problem comes when our dreamlands, regardless of what form they may take, become the only place we stay at, and as a result we start neglecting our real life. The very thing that makes someone take their mind off the pain they're experiencing might very ironically end up aggravating more pain for themselves, which in turn makes them want to escape more, and just like that they've entered a cycle, one that is very hard to escape from without getting some sort of external support. When the place you escape to is nice, at least that part of the cycle isn't unpleasant, but what about the times when it's a bad place? And I'm not necessarily talking about dark stories, but places where the things you do to alleviate the pain are just different forms of pain. Things the majority of which I can't show on this video. Just makes the downward spiral become steeper as the person trapped within it doesn't get a single waking second of rest from feeling awful. How does that make sense? What happens then? For years, my response to my problems would be leaving it for my future self to solve, while my present self would run to my own little safe world. That habit was extremely hard to break because it took so much time for me to understand that facing problems head-on is always better than letting them grow. Taking the reins is not easy, and nobody will teach you how to do it, and sometimes when you feel like you have your shit together, you'll fall back into the hole. While the world you escape to will always be there for you, your life is very unlikely to wait for you to catch up. Escapism is a core part of the human identity, and by no means do I think it's a bad part. As a matter of fact, I think it's practically impossible to just go through modern life without having somewhere to run to. But it's important to remind ourselves that they're just that, places to run to, not places to live at. And if possible, remember to make it a comfy place, and not whatever the fuck it is that I'm doing. I love you.